رحمن يا رحيم.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. It is 13 after 8 o'clock. You tuned into news and views on Salam Media. Now, the 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly, UNGA 78, opened on Tuesday, 5th September 2023, with the high-level debate beginning tomorrow. Let us understand what is the 78th UN General Assembly all about, and how does it benefit us here in South Africa. To unpack all of this is none other than Ashraf Patel. He is Senior Research Associate at the Institute for Global Dialogue. Ashraf, Assalamu alaikum, welcome to the program.
Walaikum salam, Auntie Julie and listeners. Hope you're all well.
Yep, Alhamdulillah. Nice to be talking with you. We can always count on someone like Ashraf Patel to unpack these real high level delegations, assemblies, conventions, etc., for it to make sense to us and for us to get an understanding on what is happening globally. So, what is this all about, the session all about? And of course, the all important question then, Ashraf, how does it benefit us here in South Africa?
Yes, Julie. So the UN General Assembly is an annual ritual, very much on a yearly basis in September in New York. And it has been going on for now 77, 78 years since the formation of the UN in 45. It is the largest representative body where all kind of nation states are part of. As you may know, the last several years has been dramatically challenging for several reasons. Obviously, the Russia-Ukraine conflict and the high cost of energy and food has been at the center of the UN. Because the UN, as you know, is the custodian of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And these goals are the metrics upon which nation states measure the progress on core development indicators. Now, with the conflict, as well as several major conflicts, especially in Africa, as well as the natural disasters we've seen in the last several weeks, I would imagine that would occupy a key part of the UN agenda this week.
Ashraf, what I'm also hearing is that all these high level events and intergovernmental conversations that are normally held during the General Assembly, this time around, women will work to ensure that the needs, viewpoints, and voices of women and girls are prioritized, and to remind the global community that there can be no real progress without gender equality. This has been a talking point not only with the UN but other bodies all globally for a long, long time. Do you believe we are making progress as far as gender representation, equality, etc., is concerned?
A very relevant question, Julie. Yes, the UN Women is even a specialized UN agency dedicated to integrate gender and women equity at all levels in policy making in the UN and the global system. However, it has fallen short of its objectives for several reasons. One is the recent rise of right-wing social conservatism in most parts, both in the global north and in the global south. That has seen a major kind of stagnation regarding women, mainstreaming of women in all aspects of society. And then, of course, conflicts. So wherever there are conflicts, like in Sub-Saharan Africa, West Africa, the Sudan, etc., you would have the complete marginalization of women, where women and children are then on the front lines of the conflict and suffer the most. So there has been, unfortunately, a major stagnation and backtracking of women in these aspects.
Okay, Ashraf, lots to talk about regarding women and girls. Also, does anything concrete actually come out of these type of dialogues? But let's respond to that right after the ad break, inshallah.
Okay.
Conveniently located along the banks of the Crocodile River bordering the Kruger National Park, as a guest at Buckler's Africa Lodge, one can enjoy an amazing sunrise or sunset on our spacious deck area while you catch a glimpse of some wildlife sightings along the Crocodile River. The sounds of the African savannah will greet you whilst you enjoy your morning coffee. Buckler's Africa Lodge by Tingana Collection. Buckler's Africa Lodge is ideally situated only 6 kilometers from the Crocodile Bridge Gate in the Kruger National Park. Catering for all travelers with variety, we have 4 types of the finest rooms: superior rooms, deluxe suites, and 2-bedroomed family units. Each room is equipped with the finest amenities to make your stay unforgettable. Guests can choose between the self-catering option or book their accommodation with breakfast and dinner included. Buckler's Africa Lodge is your ideal location for the ultimate Kruger getaway experience. We specialize in exhilarating and educational game drives in Kruger, tailor-made to suit your family. Inquire about our various accommodation offerings and other activities. Visit www.tingana.co.za for more information. Buckler's Africa Lodge by Tingana Collection. Experience the pulse of Africa with us.
There's no smell that takes me back to the comfort of my childhood than the smell of blackseed oil being applied by my nanny. Now I'm using Tib Blackseed in my own home to soothe sniffles and coughs, to help with digestion and immunity, and of course, as part of my beauty routine. After all these years, I've come to appreciate the wisdom in finding comfort and shifa in trusted treatments like Tib Blackseed. You can find Tib Blackseed at all leading pharmacies or find out more at blackseed.co.za.
Ah, the kitchen, the heart of the home, where memories are made and celebrated. Our go-to place for those freshly stacked pancakes early in the morning or for that late-night snack munchies. We are in there together, cooking, eating, and celebrating life together. Let's keep the kitchen a place that is shared by everyone, where we build stronger bonds and grow together. Sunfoil, Now We Cooking. Visit nowwecooking.co.za for recipes that everyone can help make.
Sponsor an orphan, and you'll help support a vulnerable child to have the education they've always dreamed of, so they can build a brighter future. You'll be feeding a hungry stomach and a hungry mind with knowledge that will last them a lifetime. That's the power of an education. Sponsor an orphan now with Islamic Relief.
When the perfect blend of stylish decor, exquisite halal cuisine, and warm hospitality come together, it could only mean Al Bayt Lodge, your true home away from home. Al Bayt is the ideal heaven for families, business people, and tourists with its 4-star family rooms and other luxurious facilities. Conveniently situated close to Port Elizabeth Airport, the beach, and other amenities, your stay will be truly unforgettable, as you'll be taking home lasting memories of the warm hospitality, the serenity and tranquility that Al Bayt has to offer. For reservations, call 041 583 6415 or visit www.albaytlodge.co.za.
Breaking stereotypes, moving boundaries, joining hands. Salam Media. Humanity sets the agenda.
It is exactly 8:22 a.m. a Monday, the 18th of September 2023. Welcome back. News and Views on Salam Media. We're talking with Ashraf Patel, Senior Research Associate at the Institute for Global Dialogue, and we're looking at what is the 78th UN General Assembly and how does it benefit us here in South Africa. Back to you, Ashraf. Would you like to respond to all of those questions?
Yes, Julie. What was also relevant this past weekend was the G77 plus China summit that was held in Cuba, Havana. And that was quite interesting. The outcomes document was quite remarkably detailed, over 9 pages, and it unpacked some of the core challenges on sustainable development, on conflict, on a range of issues. One or two or three of the big issues as follows: the development aid system seems to be crumbling without adequate resources. The high cost of debt. So again, sadly, Sub-Saharan Africa is facing another major debt crisis, with the cost of interest or the rate of interest for African nations amongst the highest in the world. The average African nation state is paying on average 38% of their budget on interest on loans to creditors and the IMF. And that is diverting scarce resources away from social expenditure and development. So it's a huge...
Can we, Ashraf, can we focus a little more on that particular issue? I think it's really very, very important. Third world countries get loans from obviously the rich Western countries or first world countries, and you've just indicated the high interest rate. Once again, it's a form of colonialism, isn't it? It's almost a form of you indebted to them for the rest of your life. And if and when these loans are not, if these countries are unable to pay back the loans, what then? I've asked this question previously to other analysts as well, and I'm not quite sure if I've received an adequate enough answer to it. Would that then mean that the countries, these particular countries who may be rich in mineral resources, would have to perhaps give up their rights to those assets? I'm kind of wondering how all of this works.
Yes, Auntie Julie, broadly you are correct. This has been the IMF and World Bank approach since the 80s. Remember, the first and second waves of Africa debt crisis commenced in the 80s and 90s. And only in the 90s was the highly indebted relief program. But we're now getting back into that cycle 20 years later. So the playbook of the IMF is, once they bail you out, you got to implement structural reform, mainly austerity. And that means generally cutting back on social expenditure, but also mortgaging strategic resources, such as mining or land. And this is very complex, but completely unethical. And these are some of the statements that the G77 has made, which is broadly the non-aligned movement group, if you like. So they're coming with a much more solid, progressive social justice program going into the UN General Assembly. And that may change the dynamic and giving the developing South and Sub-Saharan Africa stronger voice in the UN system and in UN institutions. So this debt is completely crippling much of Africa, even the rising stars like Kenya and Ghana, whom the World Bank held up as kind of poster child of kind of free market economics. They are crumbling under debt, and their systems are not robust enough to manage the social challenges. So yes, a new model is definitely required for Sub-Saharan Africa.
Because it does seem that the third world countries are being held hostage by the developed world, by, like you've indicated, very high interest rates, etc. And I guess, and I may be completely off point here, but I'm also thinking, as you and I speak this morning, Ashraf, is that's the reason why we see so many coups playing out in third world countries, because these people and corrupt leaders are so vulnerable that anything suggested by a Western nation in their own interests can get these people to agree to their terms and conditions, and before long you see a coup and a change of leadership because it serves the Western agenda.
To an extent, that is one of the drivers. Remember, the African elites, political elites, are very self-serving and completely disconnected from society, from the masses. And over decades, the same old story, the same old playbook of you get elected, the elections are rigged, the elites get in, the resources are misallocated, it doesn't flow to the masses. And I think this has been going on for 30 years. And then, of course, the Franco-Africa unequal relations has become very systemic. And those two drivers have seen a rapid kind of succession of coups. And yes, that could be a driver. The systems are not working. There is a new kind of thinking on the ground. And I would say broadly it can be categorized that the democratic dividend has not really delivered on the development agenda. And that gap is feeding into all these instabilities and chaos.
Okay, let's get back to the 78th UNGA 2023, and there seems to be huge focus on the issue regarding women. We do know that on the 7th of September, a gender snapshot report revealed that current trends would leave more than 340 million women and girls. I should imagine that's probably an estimate of 8% of the world's female population in extreme poverty by 2030. And they are focusing on that issue. And the other issue, which also needs a lot of attention, is obviously the SDG indicators. What do you make of those two very salient issues? Do you think that they're going to be tackling it and come out with concrete suggestions which they can put into action almost immediately?
Yes, these are traditional themes, regular themes of the UN. So it definitely is the Sustainable Development Goals, integrating gender into the SDGs and the development agenda, as well as climate change, and more recently themes such as skills development in the fourth industrial revolution. So these themes are more dominant themes going forward. And the challenge, as you said, is how would all these domains, the dimensions, assist women and the gender equity agenda? And there's a lot of programs within the UN system, from the UNDP to the UN Environment Program, to the UN Industrial Development Organization, to the ILO. They all have significant programs within these themes. And at a national level is the challenge. So yes, the frameworks are good at the UN level. At the national level, where the nation state and different departments in the developing South need to implement in partnership with a range of actors at a local level. That is the challenge. That is where the capacity is required. That is where systems change thinking is required. And I think that will always be a challenge as we go forward.
Okay, let's wrap up by looking at the United States' stance on this assembly, UNGA 2023. We understand that a White House advisor said, and this is my final question because I'm sure you need to go in a minute or two. Okay, a White House advisor suggested that Joe Biden will push for greater action to tackle the climate crisis, fund development in the global south, which we've touched on already, and to bolster support for Ukraine amid Russia's invasion, when the world leaders obviously will hold high-level talks at the United Nations. That is the key issue, is it not? The whole issue around Russia and Ukraine. And almost 2 years on, we don't see Russia letting up on the invasion into the Ukraine.
Look, these are the key global and regional issues. I would definitely say the climate change as well as the natural disasters in the last several weeks would definitely take center stage for several reasons. One is, as we prepare for COP28 in Dubai in November, there's still no formal agreement on the loss and damage fund that were promised in COP27. And that would be a key platform this week in how are we going to mobilize the resources that has not been forthcoming from the North for this task. So that is the number one challenge this year in the UN system. Definitely, Russia-Ukraine will be one of many issues, but I would say several other conflicts that have mushroomed in sub-Saharan Africa will also take center stage. So it would be finding peaceful resolutions for all these conflicts. There may be some hope on the horizon as, you know, the system of peacekeeping takes place. These are very complex kind of institutional processes. But I would say, as usual, the UN tries to move forward, but it is a large grouping and therefore decision-making is very slow. That's always been with the UN General Assembly.
My final question, I did say that was the final one, but how does this all benefit us down here in South Africa?
Very good question. I think the cynical view is that not much. South Africa has been part of all these platforms, from the G20 to the UN to BRICS to all these formations, and it's a huge expense. I mean, diplomacy is a huge budget, and there's lots of resources that go into diplomacy. I'm not sure if the rate of return is reaping the benefits. The verdict is still out whether our expensive diplomatic resources are returning any of the development and trade dividends. There's a lot of perspectives in international relations, but I'm taking a more cynical view that it's quite an expensive exercise, and maybe we need to rethink how we engage the global platforms for our own national development pathways. I think it's a robust debate, and many scholars are debating these.
And I share your cynical views, I might add. That's where we leave it. Ashraf, always a pleasure talking with you. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam, Auntie Julie.
That was Ashraf Patel, Senior Research Associate at the Institute for Global Dialogue, talking to us about the 78th UN General Assembly and how does South Africa benefit? You've heard the answers there. A deep thinker. Always a pleasure talking with him on News and Views here at Salam Media. And that brings us up to 8:36 News and Views. And of course, in a minute or two, we'll be crossing over to Jerusalem to talk with Abir Zayad.